Hi, everybody. This is Candid Frank. This is Leaf Talk, and he's Aaron William Freeland. And thank you for joining us. And if you want to follow along, you can look up Candid Frank Stanisha on YouTube, and you can check out some of the other stuff Aaron and I do as well with David and such. So we're here to talk about hockey. You know, I got a notification this morning that says, "Okay, got to do Leaf Talk." I went, "Oh shit! Is we still getting hockey season?"
Yeah,
I forgot all about it. When was the last time we played? 1985? I mean, holy mackerel, 3 days off. You know, it really does sort of drift out of your life.
It definitely does. I mean, I'm glad that we did the show on Saturday, but you know, it's getting to be a bit of a slog here, getting down to the very last few games of the season. I find it interesting that we haven't had a Saturday game yet, and I mentioned this the last time we talked.
Not gonna have one.
As you were very sure to point out, Saturday's only a big day for hockey in Canada. The rest of the world has other concerns. So,
well, the rest of the world being the United States.
Well, you know, such as just.
Yeah. So this is, you know, if you watch this show or if you follow me and you'll think that I can't blame people for thinking that you know, I'm a conspiracy theorist. You know, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like the guy who sees something really believes what he's seeing, and somehow it's an illusion. And you know, and you begin to doubt yourself. But it seems every so often one begins to doubt themselves, and in my case, I begin to doubt myself, that the league does have a little favoritism towards Florida. And it's like, you know, because it's not overt, but it keeps popping up. It popped up again. How did it pop up? Okay. Good sportsmanship is, there's a penalty in the National Hockey League called unsportsmanlike penalty, right?
Yeah.
What fits under that category is this. I will do it because the National Hockey League will not suspend me for doing it. That is illegal in the National Hockey League until Florida does it against the Leafs. Intent to injure is a penalty, is something that is supposed to be penalized. So when a goaltender is fallen upon, never mind accident by purpose, on purpose, it was on purpose. There was no accident on purpose. Player gets up, goalie is a little bit in pain, and turns out Skinner is okay, but we really don't know how okay he is. Player who does it goes to penalty box. Teammate comes to penalty box and pats him on the back for doing what he did.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know. The way that looks is the way I feel about the National Hockey League and the Florida Panthers. And I said to you off air, I use this phrase. I feel as though the Florida Panthers look at the opposition and say, "My daddy's the boss. My daddy's the boss."
Well, you know, you're not necessarily far wrong on that one. Brian Campbell is a well and highly placed executive with the Florida Panthers. You know, it's an interesting coincidence that his father, Colin Campbell, happens to be one of the high mucky mucks when it comes to the NHL. He was hired by the NHL as the league's senior vice president and director of hockey operations, taking over from Brian Burke. You know, it's one of those things where you look at it and it's like, this should be a penalty. Why is it not being? Oh, and you and I, we're both not conspiracy theorists by any stretch of the imagination. No, I okay, there is a conspiracy I believe in that the Maple Leafs are never going to win a cup again. That's just kind of the way it goes. But you know, by the same token, it's one of those, you know, there seems to be an awful lot of favoritism and things that swing certain ways when you look at how the game is played these days and how it's officiated these days. I think is the more telling one. And when even Don Cherry comes out and calls the referee hot garbage, you know that something is up. You know,
Absolutely.
it
Absolutely. We talked about, sorry, am I okay to jump in? I
yeah.
don't want to be rude. We saw the too many men on the ice non-call.
Mm-hmm.
The penalty, it's a penalty when the line a player cannot cross is a player cannot play the puck who's jumping onto the ice, play the puck or get in the play until the player he's replacing is behind the bench. In other words, on the other side of the boards.
Yep.
So this is a yes and no answer. It's not a maybe, it's like the difference between a hook and a high stick, right? You know what a high stick is. You make contact with the guy's face with your stick, it's a penalty. There is no, the only gray area we've learned about this year is the follow through. All right. So there is an escape clause, but it's the follow through. Other than that, when you hit a guy with your stick, it's a penalty. It's not a question. It's only an answer. When you do that, when you replace the guy on the ice and you don't wait for him to go on the other side and you touch the puck or you make a play, in this case, you interfere with a player who's going to get the puck. You're putting yourself in the play. This is not a call that a referee makes based on what they think. It's a simple rule, obvious call that a referee is doing this. We see the jokes that, you see the jokes like memes, like three blind mice, that kind of thing. The problem this year in the playoffs is they're not memes. They're just not. No. It's not a meme.
Now, there are some that will be quick to point out that the Florida Panthers did actually have 8 penalties called against them in the last game. But those are sort of the egregious and overt ones that they kind of have to call. It's like puck over glass. Hooking is relatively obvious. Holding is relatively obvious, especially when it comes to holding the stick. Evan Bouchard got a penalty at the end of the first period and then a penalty at the end of the second period for cross-checking, which was, I think, questionable. But, you look at Ekblad holding the stick, Tkachuk for slashing, Sam Bennett for interference on the goalkeeper, Tkachuk again for roughing, Niko Mikkola for roughing, Seth Jones for holding, Niko Mikkola again for hooking, and Carter Verhaeghe for hooking. On the far side of it, again, you're looking at Nurse, Bouchard for cross-checking, Frederick for roughing. And again, that roughing penalty was against Matthew Tkachuk. So those two players ended up taking each other off the ice.
Well, Aaron, I've always been one of these guys that dislikes Hockey Night in Canada at times, like disrespects it. Like I don't respect Hockey Night in Canada. I'll give you one of the ways I don't respect Hockey Night in Canada. When they create an off-ramp or an excuse for bad officiating. And here's one of the primary things I hate the most about officiating as described in Hockey Night in Canada specifically. Well, the referee gave that team 2 penalties. The team now that was on the power play, they better be looking for another. The refs are going to be looking to call a penalty on them. Excuse me? Wait a second. Are you telling me Hockey Night in Canada says this a lot? You've grown up watching Hockey Night. Did you ever hear that statement watching Hockey Night in Canada? The equalizing the penalty?
Yeah.
You've heard it? Okay.
I have.
And to me, what does that say? You play dirty, you get too many penalties. Look, I don't care if you're playing clean, you're getting the next penalty. Excuse me? So we're giving penalties because we want to be fair to the team that's playing dirty.
And you know, like I
Hey,
had a GTHL referee as one of my teachers, and that was one of the things that he always preached about officiating in hockey was the principle of equilibration. You always wanted to make sure that it was even. You know, no team got an unnecessary advantage when it came to penalties. And his main theory was you kind of called them to control the flow of the game. Not that you were biasing it for one team or the other, but you wanted to try to keep everything as equal as possible. And when you've got a team that specializes in dirty stuff versus a group of speed merchants like the Oilers, that's not going to happen. You can't make it even. You have to call all of the penalties.
well,
Otherwise, what do you even do in there?
you can try to make it even, but in that sense, make it uneven. It's it's the same thing. This is what we're talking about because we're on this subject because Edmonton's existence requires that they be treated fairly and not lose games because the official puts his whistle in his pocket at a time when he should call a penalty. When you get games that are played, the other thing is it's not just about equalizing, because equalizing is not right. It's about calling penalties at a certain time of the game as well. There's a list of things that are said on Hockey Night in Canada. And I say Hockey Night in Canada because is there any other place, Aaron, where you and I, from being knee-high to a grasshopper to where we are now, and I to where I am, much older than you, where everything we learn about hockey, right? About watching it, about understanding it, where do we learn it? We learn it on Hockey Night in Canada. We watch Hockey Night in Canada. We watch the experts. They explain to us what's going on. And that's why I say there are times when I have no respect for Hockey Night in Canada because they feed the beast that is unsportsmanlike behavior, that is cheating. They feed it because they excuse the kind of mistakes referees make because, well, we don't want to take sides. Okay, so there's two guys on the ice, and one guy's smacking a guy with his stick, and the other guy's trying to punch him. Well, we shouldn't get involved because we don't want to affect the play. I'm sorry. You got a guy who's landing on goaltenders, and then you got a guy who's skating down the ice, and he hooks the guy, and he gets a penalty, and we're saying, well, now that equalizes it. No, it doesn't. It doesn't make it equal. And when a guy does a throat slash, well, it really doesn't deserve a penalty today. It did yesterday. It did 10 minutes ago. These are all things that are said when we watch Hockey Night in Canada. It's when a guy does something. Well, if the other team has already gotten 2 penalties, we got to let them get away with the next one because they've already been caught twice. Oh, and they haven't done anything to be penalized. But so because they haven't, we're going to have to watch to see when they do something that looks like a penalty, because sometimes it isn't even necessarily a penalty. They just call a penalty. How many times have we seen a guy get a penalty for roughing because he smacked his head against the guy's fist?
Yeah, and it's one of those, we got to let them play, and the playoffs are tougher hockey, and it's old school physical stuff, and these scrums after the play are a natural extension because these boys are just ready to go, and you got to let them have an outlet somewhere, and no.
Aaron, and this one I'll point at the National Hockey League, but Hockey Night in Canada being the water carrier in this. The next thing that I like hearing, we've been listening to lately is the other one where they say, well, we don't want to have staged fights. You don't want to have staged fights? Are you telling me that none of the fights are staged that you allow? That fights are never staged? Is that what you're saying? For goodness sake, a guy gets hurt in game 1. In game 2, a guy chases that guy the next game. That's not staged. And it's okay, though, because here's the Hockey Night in Canada. He's he's being honorable because he did something to hurt the opponent. So now the team wants to sort of take their pound of flesh. And isn't he a man because he's taking on the fight? That's not staged. That's not a staged fight.
It reminds me of the most recent Four Nations face-off, wherein Team USA players conspired to work up 3 fights in the first 9 seconds. They even had it on a text chat. What do you mean don't want staged fights? They talk out of both sides of their mouth. They expect us to believe it. But, fans love the fight.
We live in a time in a world where people think, where people in charge think people are stupid. And sometimes I have to say, Aaron, they might not be wrong.
Often they're not far off. Let's be honest here.
Well, that's just it. And you know what? We're not talking about the hockey game, so maybe we should take a minute to talk about the hockey game since we used half the show to talk about unhockey business. In the hockey business, when we talk out of both sides of our mouth, and this is, I'm hoping, going to be the closing of it. We talk out of both sides of our mouth, and really, and when I say us, I mean hockey people, I mean Hockey Night in Canada. We talk about, isn't it great when the greatest players in the league win a championship?
It
and
is.
You know what makes it great, Aaron? When the greatest players are abused by teams with lesser players, and then they end up winning because the rules
change
and benefit the team that has less talent.
I understand the only thing that both Frank and I want and hope for out of the referees, hope against hope, is consistency. Call the rules as written.
Yeah.
That's it. The game on Friday was very exciting. Edmonton tied it with 18 seconds left to force overtime. They ended up going to double overtime before it was all said and done. That was an exciting game. The number of penalties, they stopped calling penalties after the second period. It's like, well, you know what? We've hit our limit. We can't call penalties anymore. My whistle is out of penalty tweets. So I can't do that anymore. And that's just not the case. If anything, the chicanery and the shenanigans get worse in the third period. This is where the referees need to call the penalties. I don't care if it's against Toronto. If we take a penalty, we take a penalty. That's on us for thinking that we can break the rules and get away with it. It's the referees' jobs to enforce the rules. And, so far, they don't appear to have been doing a very good job of that. And I don't care if that makes me unpopular in NHL circles, but it's the truth.
Let me add to what you're saying. It's not just, the allowing of or just not calling penalties. It's when you're a player of Tavares' stature and a guy basically throws a cross check against your grill in the middle of the play in front of the net, unavoidable to see. And not only is there not a penalty, there's not a suspension, where we've seen Matthews spend, I think he got a 2 or 3 game suspension, if you remember that winter hockey game, right?
Yep.
For doing just that. It was exactly that, and to see a suspension and to think that is a suspendable offense, and then it's not even penalized, taking a goalie out, I'm never going to forget this stuff that happened to Toronto. And here's the terrible thing about it all is that Toronto's going to lose a player like Marner, and Toronto, the team believes and fans believe that because a player like Marner is a player like Marner, they can never win a cup with him. But here's what I'm going to educate you all with. If he goes to another team, not a Canadian team, let's say he goes to Florida, this will not work. The test will not work. But the question is, I'm curious to see if somebody cross-checks him into the boards like happened to him, how many times the referee's going to look the other way if he's not playing for Toronto. That's the part that scares me. And to be honest with you, it's not conspiracy theory. It's fear. Fear based on fact of knowing what's happened in the past and wondering again, is it going to happen where a player goes to another team and all of a sudden they're treated differently? That's what concerns me. If that's true, then it doesn't matter who Toronto has, does not matter how good they are. If the officiating is the way I think it is, then they'll never win, because they'll never be good players coming to play here, because now this Marner incident, what's gone on with Marner, nobody's going to want to play for the Leafs, because that guy, as good a player as he is, and the crap that he took against Florida, the cross checks after the play, all that crap, throat stuff, all that stuff. Why would you want to play for Toronto?
Yeah, and they know it's not going to get called if they come play here. So, that's an additional inducement to not go to certain markets, never mind the taxes and the exchange rate and all that other happy crappy. It's the fact that you can get roundly physically abused depending on which market you play on. And it's going to happen based on the teams that are coming to play you, because those teams don't get penalized for it.
And you've seen
Yeah.
proof. You've seen proof. You've seen, and then you watch Edmonton, and you see what happens with them, and you understand that Hockey Night in Canada basically says, to win the Stanley Cup, you need to be more like Florida than McDavid. How sad is that? How sad is that? Because that's what they're saying. They're saying you're better off to be chumps like Tkachuk, right? It's better to be a Tkachuk than it is a McDavid, because in the playoffs, a Tkachuk can do things that he can't do in the regular season. And the same is true for McDavid. There's things he can't do in the playoffs that he can do in the regular season. And is that good? It is. It is, if you don't care about the one that actually has the talent not being able to do anything. And I frown upon it, because I respect talent and ability, and I respect hard work. We're not talking here about siding with McDavid in this case, because McDavid, deserves to win the cup. I want to hand it to him. No, I want to say, and what I want to believe is that if he plays as hard as anybody else, and he's better than anybody else, he deserves a fair chance to win the cup.
Yeah. And all these players deserve the best opportunity to, all these generational talents that we keep talking about should win the cup. They deserve an equal opportunity. And I know it sounds woke and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and everybody gets a trophy, yada yada.
No. That's not what we're talking about.
It's calling the rules as written to ensure that no team has an unfair advantage over any other.
We're talking meritocracy. We're talking meritocracy, and that's a word that the people on the right use to justify doing what they're doing. And because it sounds nice, it sounds like, if I'm better, I deserve to win. And that's all we're saying.
Yep.
So it's universally acceptable to believe, anybody who does anything in any kind of endeavor, all you want is a fair chance to win. You want it to have determined because you were beaten, which is cool. I can take being beaten. But you want to know that the other guy didn't beat you because he had a leg up, or because his dad was in charge of the league. That's just poo-poo. So what Edmonton has to do is do what Toronto's done. You can't ignore all this stuff. Leave it to us to talk this BS, okay? Edmonton fans, you can talk this BS. What the players have to do is they have to rise above it. And they have to win in spite of some of the bad breaks that are put upon them, not ones that they get. These aren't bounces, all right? We're not talking about bounces. They've got to overcome some stuff that isn't just a bounce. It's just something that they've got headwinds that they've got to beat. And I think Edmonton's that much better than Florida that they can. And tonight they get a chance to prove that they can play better than Florida with the headwinds in their face. And we'll just see how Edmonton deals tonight with this game, because they need it bad, Aaron. I really think it's important that Edmonton wins this one.
Yeah, no, Stuart Skinner is going to have to stand on his literal brain in order to win this one. And it's got to start tonight. He's got to outmatch Bobrovsky. You know, Bobrovsky's already given the Edmonton Oilers their gimme, and that was Arvidsson's goal in Game 1. After that, he's been very, very solid, very hard to beat, very consistent. When it comes to defense, as at Sunday, Evan Bouchard was actually playing with Darnell Nurse. So, if you're worried about Nurse's defensive game as of late, it is likely that pairing would frequently be on the ice with the McDavid line. So as a result, you're going to be a little less exposed to Darnell Nurse's defensive warts. I'd also consider running Jake Wallman a little bit harder there, but I don't think they're going to make a change in that respect. The one thing that the Oilers will need to do is to counteract the forecheck. It's a hard rim with a forechecker towards the opposite wall. It's you fire it in on the right hand side and send the guy to the left to try to pick it up, hoping that it can beat the goalie around the net. That's what they're doing.
Unfortunately, Florida has that multi-layer. That you push it past the first guy, but there's a second guy waiting for it, and then further away there's a third guy. I've been toying with the idea that what they should do is flip the puck, like the first guy that gets in the corner, just flip it towards the score clock, and then
send an area pass.
Because I think, because I think that alley-oop, that alley-oop pass against Florida, I think it's their Achilles heel. Because if you imagine, they're pressuring you completely, that they're trying to keep you in the zone by being in the zone. And that's why, and I think they've even said it on the Hockey Night Canada broadcast, that it's one of the reasons why Florida gives up so many breakaways, because they do pressure, they do go in so deep. So play to their weakness. Their weakness is they give a lot of breakaways. So go for it. And with speed merchants like Edmonton has, for goodness sake, I know Bobrovsky has been outstanding since, like you said, the Arvidsson goal, the breakaways he stopped, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't mind an extra couple of breakaways and see what happens if I'm Edmonton.
And the way we're looking at it right now, Nugent Hopkins is listed as day-to-day, so he may not necessarily be able to go tonight, which means that they're going to have to find a replacement for left wing on the first line, and the only person who could possibly slot in there would be Jeff Skinner.
He's been practicing with them in practice. He's been in practice with them in the line.
Yeah, he's been seeing rotations with them, so that's a good thing. But yeah, I'm hoping that they go with Nurse and Bouchard, Kulak and Wallman and Ekholm and Klingberg as their six, because they're going to have to work with that. Regula's out, Hyman is obviously out, so Stewart is going to have to stand on his head. Jeff is going to have to be absolute dynamite on the left wing. If Nugent Hopkins can't go, Kane is going to have to step it up. He's going to have to match. He's going to have to match that second line. He's going to have to match with Rodriguez, Tkachuk, and Bennett.
And Edmonton's going to have to crowd Bobrovsky. They're going to have to come after him. And how much Florida likes to interfere with the opposing goaltender by the way they react when the other team gets near their goaltender.
100%.
Just by their reaction that they don't want you even going near their goaltender, because if you do and you do something, you might get away with it too, like they did on the other side. So that's what Edmonton's got to do. Kane's got to skate through the crease, through the corner. And I wouldn't even, I would say do it. What I think they should do is they should do, like a flyover or a flyby, not even try to hit them. Just a flyby to send a message, to get the referee's attention, to understand that both goaltenders could end up in trouble. And basically send that message that, it's a two-way street here. I like Edmonton's chances. Skinner, unfortunately for me, isn't the kind of player that's going to help them be better against Florida because he's a smallish player. Now, is he a Stankoven? I think Stankoven is I learned to respect that guy a lot, Aaron. Not a big guy, but he can score the big goal. That's what Skinner has to do. Because if they're going to rely on Skinner to be a plus player, it's going to be kind of hard because he's just not big enough.
Well, I had heard as well. This is another offshoot coming out of this. as part of the Austin Powers "Oops, I Fell Over" school of playing in front of the net that Sam Bennett seems to espouse. The NHL has apparently decided to open an investigation into the company that manufactures the blue paint that they use in front of the crease there. Just because a lot of players like Sam Bennett seem to have a lot of trouble keeping their feet when in that particular area. So we'll have to see if anything comes of that. Wink, wink.
What the?
That's the joke.
WTF? It's the paint's fault?
Well, I think they should certainly look into why the paint makes everything so slippery in the crease, especially for players like Sam Bennett.
Oh, I see. So when you cross that goal crease line.
Yeah. Apparently it trips them up. There's something that's going on with that paint, man. They got to look into that.
It is under the ice, right?
I am aware.
Okay.
That is the joke, sir.
Just checking. It is under the ice. Aaron, thanks for doing this, buddy. Go Edmonton. We want a Canadian team to win because Bettman doesn't. Now, I know that means he has an advantage, but you know what? Canadians through history, through time, have overcome incredible odds, just like they did in the All-Star break. The team won not because they were tougher than the Americans. They only needed to stand up to the Americans. And that's what the Edmonton Oilers have to do. They have to stand up to the National Hockey League and the Florida Panthers because they're playing against 4 referees and 6 players on the ice. So Edmonton, we know you can do it. We know you can do it. We know they can do it, right, Aaron?
Oh, we definitely know that they can do it.
Okay. And now that Aaron said that, we know it's true. Don't forget Candid Frank Sanishi on YouTube.